Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me now. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but sometimes God is working undercover in your life. You're wondering why certain people you thought would love you the most are the ones causing you the most pain. You keep asking yourself, why would God allow this? Why would he let my own family hurt me? But I'm here to tell you, sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes that distance is your deliverance. There are moments when God closes doors you were banging on, doors you thought you needed to walk through, and you get mad. You feel abandoned. But God isn't punishing you. He's saving you from something you can't see yet. When the folks you love start to act like strangers, when you feel like you got no one left in your corner, that's when you've got to lean into your faith like never before. Because he's got a plan, a better plan than you could ever write for yourself. You ever notice how when you think you're about to fall apart, somehow you get just enough strength to stand back up? That's God. That's his hand on your shoulder telling you, I'm still here. I've got you. You think it's coincidence when a stranger gives you a kind word or you find peace in the middle of chaos? No, that's divine intervention. That's proof he's working behind the curtain, moving people out of your life that were never meant to stay. You don't have to fight for a place in hearts that don't honor you. You don't have to beg for love that wounds you. God will separate you from anything that threatens your purpose. And it may hurt. It will hurt. But he's not trying to break you. He's trying to build you into who you were meant to be. So when you see relationships fade, when you feel that loneliness pressing on your chest, remember this: God doesn't waste your pain. He doesn't waste your tears. Every closed door is a sign. Every goodbye is a blessing. You are being protected. You are being prepared. You are being positioned for something greater than you can imagine. Trust that. Walk in that, and never forget you are never alone. Sometimes God removes you from situations that look good on the surface, but would destroy your spirit. It can be difficult to accept this truth because in our limited understanding, we often confuse what is attractive, comfortable, or familiar with what is good for us. You might look at a relationship that seemed perfect on paper. The person had all the qualities you thought you wanted, all the charm, the affection, the promise of companionship you longed for. Yet, without warning, it unraveled. Maybe they walked away without explanation. Maybe conflict arose that you could not resolve. Or maybe you felt a sudden heaviness in your heart you couldn't ignore. In those moments, you question yourself, wondered what you did wrong, and sometimes even question God's love for you. But what you couldn't see was that behind the smiles and promises was a deeper reality, something that could have wounded your soul in ways that would take years to heal. It happens in careers too. You pray for an opportunity, you visualize yourself stepping into that job, that promotion, that position of influence. You think about how it will make your life better, how the salary will ease your financial worries, how the title will validate your worth. When you finally get that phone call that you were not selected, you feel crushed. You replay every detail of the interview. You wonder if you could have said something different. You scroll through social media, watching others celebrate their wins, and the comparison makes you feel small. But sometimes God shuts the door because he sees the pressure you don't see. He knows that the environment you were begging to enter would have suffocated your gifts, compromised your values, and slowly drained your joy. What looked like a golden opportunity was a slow erosion of your purpose. And in his mercy, he took it away. Friendships can be no different. You may have had people around you who seemed like your biggest supporters. They cheered you on, shared laughs with you, and were present during milestones. But over time, you noticed something unsettling. Subtle put-downs hidden behind jokes. Disinterest when you spoke about your dreams. A sense of competition that left you feeling unsteady. Even then, you tried to hold on because you valued history and loyalty. You told yourself you were being sensitive, that it was better to have someone than to be alone. Yet God, who searches hearts, knew that these connections were not meant to go where he was taking you. So he allowed the distance to grow. He stirred your spirit to feel uneasy when you were with them. He made it harder to ignore that your peace was disappearing. Eventually, you had to accept that staying connected would cost you your clarity and self-worth. You see, when God begins to pull you away, it's never to punish you. It's to preserve you. Sometimes the most deceptive situations are the ones that seem to answer all your prayers. You might have found yourself in a place that met your immediate needs but threatened your long-term wholeness. Maybe you were in love with someone who filled the loneliness but quietly diminished your sense of identity. Perhaps you were part of a group that gave you belonging but demanded your silence when you wanted to speak your truth. Maybe you were achieving visible success but felt invisible to yourself. On the surface, everything seemed ideal. The picture you presented to the world looked perfect. But inside, your spirit was crying out. You were losing pieces of yourself, one compromise at a time. God, in his infinite wisdom, will never let you stay in a place that costs you your soul. Even if you can't comprehend it in the moment, he will remove you before you are destroyed from the inside out. When you find yourself asking why you were taken out of a relationship, a community, a career path, or an opportunity you believe was your destiny, remember that God is not limited by appearances. He sees the hidden motives, the subtle manipulations, the quiet erosion of your spirit. He knows what would have left you bitter, exhausted, and empty. And because he loves you too much to watch you unravel, he will intervene. Sometimes that intervention feels like loss. It feels like rejection. It feels like humiliation. But in time, you will see there was protection. You will look back and thank him for not answering the prayers you were so convinced would make you happy. Think about how many times you tried to go back to something you knew wasn't good for you. How many times you told yourself that if you tried harder, if you loved more, if you proved your worth, things would change. But each time you reached back, the door closed a little more. Each time you tried to force something, you felt less like yourself. And still, God was patient. He waited for you to see what he already knew. That nothing you were losing compared to the peace you were about to gain. That no relationship, opportunity, or status was worth sacrificing your wholeness. You might be in a season right now where you feel displaced. The people you thought would stay forever have left. The dreams you thought would fulfill you have faded. The plans you worked so hard to create have collapsed. It can feel like you are standing in the middle of ruins. But what you call ruins, God calls clearing ground. He is removing what is hollow, what is weak, what is built on sand. He is making space for something solid, something true, something that will honor who you really are. It takes courage to trust him when everything familiar disappears. It takes faith to believe that the loss is not meant to diminish you, but to set you free. Yet every time you choose to surrender instead of striving, you align yourself with a greater purpose than you can see. There will be moments when the temptation to go back feels overwhelming. When the loneliness feels sharper than any relief your mind can offer. When you wonder if you imagined all the reasons you had to leave. In those moments, you have to remind yourself that God does not confuse or torment you. He does not lead you away without preparing something better. If he has removed you, it is because he loves you enough to protect you from settling for less than his best. It's easy to romanticize what you left behind when you forget how it made you feel. It's easy to remember the good moments and erase the times you cried yourself to sleep. But the same God who delivered you once will keep you. He will heal the parts of you that still ache. He will restore what you thought you lost. And he will open new doors that reflect your growth, not your desperation. When you think about situations that look good on the surface but would have destroyed your spirit, be gentle with yourself. You did not fail because you couldn't make it work. You succeeded because you were willing to let go. You honored your worth. You listened to the quiet voice inside that said, this is not for you. You chose faith over fear, and that choice is what sets you apart. It is what prepares you for blessings that align with your purpose. It is what strengthens your character and deepens your trust. No matter how painful the separation, it is always better to lose what is false than to keep it and lose yourself. God will never ask you to stay in a place where your spirit is dying. He will never leave you without a path forward. Even when you can't see the destination, trust that he is leading you somewhere safe, somewhere sacred, somewhere you were always meant to be. Closed doors and sudden distance can be divine protection, not punishment. This is a truth that many people struggle to accept because in the moment it feels like rejection, failure, or abandonment. When something you wanted so badly slips away or someone you trusted begins to drift from your life, the first instinct is often to blame yourself. You replay every conversation and interaction, searching for something you could have done differently. You questioned whether you were enough or whether you deserved to be chosen, included, or loved. It can feel like a personal indictment, a declaration that you were somehow lacking. But what if that closed door was never about your worth? What if the sudden distance was not an indictment of your character, but a shield around your destiny? Imagine how much heartache God spares you by preventing you from stepping into spaces that would have harmed you. You might have believed that opportunity was the pinnacle of your dreams. You pictured yourself thriving, celebrated, fulfilled. You were willing to overlook the small red flags, the subtle unease in your spirit, because you thought the outcome justified the compromise. You were ready to settle for the version of success that looked good to everyone else, even if it meant betraying the quiet knowing in your soul. When the door slammed shut, you probably felt disoriented. Maybe you even felt humiliated. But over time, you began to see that you were being spared. The door closed to save you from a future you could not yet imagine, one that would have drained your joy and fractured your peace. What felt like punishment was, in truth, a form of love so fierce, it was willing to disappoint your ego to protect your purpose. Sometimes God creates distance in relationships because he knows that certain people cannot accompany you into the next chapter of your life. Their presence may have been necessary for a season, but their influence cannot remain as you grow into who you were called to become. You might notice that communication starts to fade without an obvious cause. The conversations feel more forced. The laughter doesn't flow as free. You wonder if you're imagining things, if you are being too sensitive or critical. You try to hold on tighter to recapture what you shared. But the more you chase, the more elusive it becomes. It is tempting to interpret this as rejection or betrayal. But what if this slow drift is an act of grace? What if God is removing you from environments that no longer nourish your spirit? What if he is creating space for new connections that will honor your growth and support your calling? When you feel that sudden distance, it often stirs up old insecurities. Maybe you were taught that you had to earn love by proving yourself useful or agreeable. Maybe you believed that being chosen was the ultimate validation of your worth. So when the relationship fades or the opportunity disappears, it feels like confirmation that you are unworthy. But you are not unworthy. You are being protected from attachments that would have kept you small. You are being guided away from people who could not celebrate your evolution. Not everyone can handle the light that shines from a person who is becoming fully themselves. Some people will feel threatened by your authenticity, and others will quietly resent your growth because it highlights their own stagnation. The distance, as painful as it feels, is often God's way of preserving your peace and freeing you from the expectations that would suffocate your spirit. Closed doors can also redirect you toward paths you never considered. You might have had a carefully crafted vision for your future. You were convinced that your plan was the only way forward. But then, without warning, every effort you made began to fall apart. Every strategy failed. Every door you knocked on stayed shut. You prayed, you fasted, you did everything you knew to do, but nothing worked. It's hard not to feel abandoned in moments like these. You wonder why God would allow you to invest so much hope and energy into something that was never meant to be. But sometimes the collapse of your plans is the only way God can guide you toward his purpose. If everything had worked the way you imagined, you might have never discovered the gifts you were created to share. You might have settled for a life that looked impressive, but left you hollow inside. Closed doors force you to surrender your attachment to the familiar and open yourself to something bigger than your imagination. You may not realize it now, but there's protection in unanswered prayers. Think about the times you were desperate for something or someone, convinced that your happiness depended on it. You begged God to make it happen. You promised you would be grateful, that you would never ask for anything else. But he said no, or perhaps he said nothing at all. In that silence, you felt abandoned. But the truth is, you were being loved in a way that didn't feel like love in the moment. You were being protected from a counterfeit blessing, from a path that would have cost you your peace. The absence of what you thought you needed made space for something more aligned with your soul. You learned that you could survive disappointment. You learned to trust that if a door closes, it is because there is something behind it that was never meant to touch your life. Sometimes closed doors reveal what you truly believe about yourself and about God. When everything is going well, it is easy to say you trust him. But when nothing goes according to plan, when people walk away, when opportunities evaporate, that is when your faith is refined. That is when you learn whether your trust is rooted in circumstances or in the unchanging character of God. Do you believe he is still good when you don't get what you want? Do you believe he still loves you when you feel forgotten? Do you believe he is still working on your behalf when you have no evidence? The seasons of closed doors invite you to anchor your identity in something deeper than success or approval. They teach you to find your worth in who you are, not in what you achieve or who chooses you. There is a particular ache that comes with sudden distance from people you love. You replay memories, searching for a reason why the connection faded. You wonder if you said something wrong or failed to show up in the right way. But sometimes the truth is simpler and harder to accept. Their role in your story was complete. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some are meant to teach you, to mirror back to you the places you still need healing, to prepare you for deeper connections later on. When God removes people from your life, it is rarely because he wants you to suffer. It is because he wants you to grow. He wants you to become someone who no longer clings to what is familiar at the expense of your own becoming. He wants you to trust that when the wrong people leave, the right ones have room to enter. Closed doors and sudden distance are often the only way God can move you into alignment with your purpose. If you had your way, you might have stayed in places that were comfortable but limiting. You might have remained entangled in relationships that kept you stuck in old patterns. And you might have accepted roles that were beneath your capacity out of fear of stepping into the unknown. So he intervened. He disrupted your plans. He removed the people who were no longer meant to walk with you. He created space for you to discover who you really are without the influence of voices that never saw your true value. In time, you will look back and see that what felt like punishment was always protection. You will see that every loss was a hidden gain, every rejection, a redirection, every closed door, a passageway to something more honest and more beautiful than you dared to hope. Unexpected support shows up when you least expect it. God never leaves you alone. There are moments when life pushes you to your knees, when you feel the walls closing in and no one seems to notice the struggle you are fighting just to keep your head above water. You might be sitting alone in your room late at night, replaying all the ways things have fallen apart. The people you thought would be your safety net have vanished or grown silent. The plans you relied on have crumbled. The resources you believed would sustain you have dried. It is in this quiet desperation that you often discover the truth. God is closer than you realize, and he will send help in ways you never could have orchestrated yourself. Sometimes that help comes in the form of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, suddenly reaching out with a word of encouragement that pierces through your loneliness. Maybe they send you a message that feels almost supernatural in its timing, as if they were prompted by something beyond themselves. You read their words and feel a rush of warmth in your chest, a momentary lifting of the heaviness you have been carrying. You might not have the strength to reply right away, but you know you are not invisible. You are not forgotten. Other times, help arrives through a stranger's kindness that interrupts your downward spiral. You might be standing in a grocery store line, worried you won't have enough to cover the essentials you need. Your mind is spinning with shame and anxiety. Then the person behind you gently taps your shoulder and says, "I've got this." You want to protest, but they insist. You thank them, voice trembling, and step outside with tears pooling in your eyes. In that simple act, you feel something you haven't felt in weeks. Hope. That unexpected support is God's way of reminding you that provision doesn't always come from the channels you expect. He has 1,000 ways to meet your needs, and you never know which he will use. There are seasons when the only support you crave is the reassurance that you matter, that your existence has significance even when you feel like a burden. You might be wrestling with regret, telling yourself you should be further along, that you should be stronger, wiser, more successful. And in that moment of self-condemnation, someone offers you grace you can't give yourself. Maybe it's a counselor who listens without judgment. Maybe it's a pastor who prays with you when you can't find the words. Maybe it's a child who climbs into your lap and tells you they love you for no reason at all. These encounters are not coincidences. They are reminders that you are not walking this path alone. Even when you have lost sight of your worth, God is working through others to reflect it back to you. Unexpected support can also look like opportunities opening at precisely the right moment. Perhaps you have been searching for work, sending out countless applications, and hearing nothing but silence. You are exhausted, discouraged, and questioning your abilities. Just when you decide you can't bear another rejection, you receive an email inviting you to interview for a position you never applied for, one that seems almost tailor-made for your skills and passion. You wonder how your name even came up. You tell yourself it must be a mistake. But it is no mistake. It is the unfolding of a plan you cannot see, a sign that God's timing does not follow your deadlines. Sometimes the help God sends doesn't feel like help at all in the beginning. You might lose something you thought you needed, your job, your relationship, your security. At first, the loss feels like punishment. But in the vacuum it leaves, you discover reserves of creativity and resilience you didn't know you possessed. A new idea sparks in your mind. A new path takes shape under your feet. People come alongside you to nurture that vision, offering guidance, resources, and encouragement. You realize that if you hadn't been pushed out of what was comfortable, you would have never discovered what was possible. The support that shows up in these moments is often disguised as disruption, but over time you see it for what it is. Provision. One of the most beautiful ways God demonstrates his presence is through the quiet conviction in your own spirit that you will survive even when everything says you won't. There are moments when no one else can see your battle, when no encouraging word or financial breakthrough arrives right away. And yet, you wake up the next day and find that you still have a measure of strength. You still have a spark of faith that refuses to be extinguished. That resilience is not something you manufacture on your own. It is grace. It is the evidence that God is sustaining you from the inside out, giving you the courage to take one more step even when you can't see the destination. Unexpected support can also come through clarity. You may have been agonizing over a decision, feeling torn in 1,000 directions. The confusion weighs on you, draining your energy and stealing your peace. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, an answer crystallizes in your mind. You feel a sense of assurance that cannot be explained by logic alone. You know what you need to do, and even though the path ahead is still uncertain, you feel lighter. That clarity is a gift. It is God's way of guiding you when you can no longer trust your own reasoning. Sometimes the support is simply the presence of someone who refuses to leave. They may not have solutions. They may not even understand the depth of your struggle, but they sit with you in the darkness, unafraid of your pain. They hold your hand or offer a shoulder to cry on. They remind you that you don't have to carry it all by yourself. Their quiet companionship is a powerful expression of God's love. In a world that moves so quickly, in a culture that often rewards performance over presence, these moments of simple solidarity are sacred. It's important to remember that support rarely shows up in the way you imagine. You might expect it to arrive through the people you have invested the most in, but sometimes it comes from unexpected directions. The friend you thought was closest to you might not be the one who stands by you in crisis. But someone you barely knew becomes your greatest ally. The door you kept trying to force open stays closed, but a new path reveals itself without you having to strive. These surprises are evidence that God's provision is not limited by your expectations. He will move heaven and earth to ensure you are cared for, even if that means rerouting your plans. If you have ever found yourself in a season of profound loneliness, you know how easily the mind can convince you that no one cares, that you are fighting an invisible battle all by yourself. But look back over your life. Think about the times when help arrived unannounced. When you received a check in the mail just before your rent was due. When someone prayed for you at the precise moment you were about to give up. When a stranger's smile reminded you that kindness still exists. These are not random accidents. They are the fingerprints of a God who sees you, who anticipates your needs before you even voice them. You may never fully understand how many times you have been rescued in ways you couldn't perceive. How many times God has placed someone in your path to keep you from falling apart. How many times he has sent a whisper of hope into your spirit when you were too tired to keep praying. The very fact that you are here reading these words is proof that you have been sustained by a love that will not let you go. Unexpected support is a reminder that you are part of something larger than your struggle. Even when you feel unworthy or overlooked, you are held, you are seen, you are loved. God never leaves you alone. Your inner peace and clarity are proof that He is guiding you away from harm. When everything around you feels uncertain or broken, and yet there is a stillness in your spirit that you can't explain, that is no accident. It is not denial or naivety. It is a divine assurance settling over you like a blanket in the cold. You might be standing in the middle of circumstances that would have once unraveled you, but instead of panic, you feel calm. Instead of confusion, you sense a quiet understanding that you are exactly where you need to be. This peace is not something you manufacture with positive thinking or wishful dreaming. It is evidence that God is active in your life, leading you away from what could have damaged you and toward what will heal you. Sometimes you look at what you've lost and wonder if you've made a mistake. You wonder if you walked away too soon or fought too little. But then you remember how restless you felt before you made that decision. You remember how heavy your spirit was, how every day felt like an exercise in survival rather than living. You would lay your head on the pillow at night and feel the ache in your chest, the quiet voice inside whispering that you were not in the right place. When you finally listened to that voice and took the step you were afraid to take, something shifted. You felt a deep breath rise up from somewhere you didn't know existed. You felt a lightness as if a burden you couldn't name had been lifted. That moment was not coincidence or self-delusion. It was confirmation. It was God saying, yes, this is the way forward. There are times when your life appears perfectly fine to everyone else, but inside you know something is wrong. You might be in a relationship that looks healthy from the outside. You smile in photos, attend events, and say all the right things. But in the quiet hours, you feel hollow. You feel yourself shrinking, compromising little pieces of your truth to keep the peace. You keep trying to convince yourself that this is normal, that every relationship has its difficulties, that maybe you are expecting too much. But then the clarity comes. It might not arrive in a dramatic moment. Sometimes it comes in a simple realization that you can't keep living like this. It dawns on you that real love does not require you to disappear. And in that clarity, there is peace, a sense of alignment, a knowing that this awareness is not meant to torment you, but to set you free. That clarity is God's guidance, a light in the darkness showing you the way out of what was never meant to hold you. Peace is often misunderstood. Some people think peace means everything has to be perfect and everyone has to approve of your choices. But peace is not found in other people's validation. It is not contingent on circumstances aligning exactly the way you imagined. True peace is an internal state that does not depend on external agreement. It is the ability to sit in the middle of uncertainty and still feel safe, to walk away from what no longer serves you and trust that you are not abandoning your destiny, but protecting it. When you feel that peace, you can be sure it is not simply relief from avoiding conflict. It is reassurance that you are honoring your spirit, and in doing so, you are aligning with God's design for your life. Clarity is another gift you receive when you surrender to guidance that is greater than your understanding. Clarity doesn't always arrive when you want it to. Sometimes you pray for answers and hear nothing but silence. You ask for signs and feel like the heavens are ignoring you. But then without warning, clarity emerges like the first light of morning breaking through the night. You suddenly understand why something had to end. You see how the disappointment was actually a rescue. You recognize that the closed door was an act of mercy. This clarity is not just intellectual hot and take. It is spiritual. It brings a calm confidence that you don't have to keep questioning yourself. You don't have to keep rehearsing every detail to find peace. You are free to accept what is and trust what is coming. Think back on the times you were most afraid to let go. Maybe it was a job that provided stability but drained your soul. You stayed because you were afraid of what would happen if you left. You told yourself you were being responsible, that it was selfish to walk away, but inside you were deteriorating. You lost your joy, your creativity, your sense of purpose. Every day felt like a performance. Then, when you finally had the courage to step away, you braced for regret and chaos. But instead, you felt something unexpected, relief. Relief that you didn't have to pretend anymore. Relief that you could finally breathe. That peace was not proof you had made a reckless choice. It was proof you had made the right one. Sometimes peace shows up when you decide to set boundaries that you once believed would drive everyone away. You were taught to be accommodated, to keep the peace at any cost. You were praised for your kindness, for how much you gave without asking for anything in return. But you started to notice how drained you felt after every interaction, how resentment grew quietly in your chest. You wondered if there was something wrong with you for feeling exhausted by the people you loved. Then you realized that love without boundaries is not love. It is obligation. It is fear. When you finally spoke the truth and said no where you used to say yes, you expected guilt to consume you. Instead, you felt steady. You felt clear. You felt like you were standing in your own life for the first time. That is what peace feels like. That is how you know God is guiding you. Peace and clarity often arrive hand in hand, especially in moments when you take a step that others don't understand. You might be criticized, questioned, or even ridiculed for choosing a different path. People may accuse you of being selfish or unrealistic. But when you lie down at night, you feel settled. You feel that you no longer have to betray yourself to maintain an illusion. That quiet assurance is God's way of telling you that you are not lost, that you are finally found. It can be difficult to trust your inner peace when everything outside of you is chaotic. When finances are uncertain, relationships are strained, and your future feels unsteady, you might question whether the calm you feel is just numbness or denial. But true peace is different. It does not come from pretending problems don't exist. It comes from trusting that you are not navigating them alone. It comes from believing that even if you don't know exactly how things will unfold, you are being guided step by step. Every time you feel that clarity rising inside of you, that certainty that you can keep moving forward, it is a sign that you are being led away from harm and toward healing. This peace is not fragile. It does not evaporate the moment circumstances change. It anchors you through disappointment and delay. It reminds you that your worth is not dependent on what you achieve or who approves of you. It is a peace that transcends understanding, a peace that cannot be manufactured by willpower or determination. It is a gift that arrives when you stop striving and start trusting. There is power in recognizing that the clarity you feel is not an accident. It is not simply a result of exhaustion or giving up. It is the fruit of surrender, the outcome of letting go of what you cannot control and opening yourself to divine wisdom. That clarity allows you to make decisions that honor your well-being, even if those decisions don't make sense to anyone else. It gives you the courage to release what is familiar but harmful, to step into the unknown with faith instead of fear. Your inner peace and clarity are the compass that God uses to guide you. They are the quiet confirmation that you are moving in the direction of freedom. They are proof that you are not alone, that even in the midst of uncertainty, you are being led with love and purpose. Every time you feel that deep, unshakable calm, remember that it is not weakness or naivety, it is strength. It is evidence that you are in alignment with something greater than yourself, something that will never lead you astray. When you look back on every closed door, every sudden distance, every moment when unexpected support appeared, and every quiet surge of peace and clarity, you will see a pattern too precise to be random. You will understand that none of it was punishment, none of it was abandonment, and none of it was coincidence. It was all evidence that God has been guiding you, protecting you, and preparing you for more than you could ever imagine. Even when you didn't feel worthy, even when you questioned every step, He was already orchestrating a path to healing, freedom, and purpose. Trust the way He leads you. Trust the stillness He places in your spirit, and trust that you are never alone.